بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Welcome back everyone to another class in Usul al-Fiqh. Today inshallah we will conclude the section of the qawadah of the critiques, doing number 11, 12 and 13. And then after 13, he is going to give a general discussion of all of the critiques, and we will stop right before the conclusion. And then the conclusion of Kitab al-Qiyas, or the book of analogy, we'll do that in tomorrow's lecture, and then we'll begin the next book, which is Kitab al-Istidlal. So today we're going to talk about number 11, a rejection of the ratio legis and its description, which is oftentimes called al-Mutalaba. And then in that, there are going to be some details and some examples. And then number 12 is a difference between the description of the original legal issue and the branch legal issue. And then this is where we will, you have to remember fractions. We will say that there is a portion that overlaps both, but not all of the description overlaps both. So sometimes you can have a partial overlap, which is a very detailed thing that you kind of need to keep in mind. Number 13 is to demonstrate or to demarcate, and we'll give an example of that. And then, as I said, he will conclude with a lengthy section, lengthy relatively speaking, lengthy section on summarizing all of the critiques. So all of the critiques go back to prevention, and we will talk about the general style of debates between the affirming school and the critiquing school. So school A and school B, the affirming school and the critiquing school, using my nomenclature in the classes. And then he will give us two ways when critiques are found in proofs, not in the scholarly conversation, either before it is offered or afterwards. And then he'll give two examples of those. And then we will come right before the conclusion of the section. The reason I'm not doing the conclusion is that it's not really it's a conclusion is a section, so it needs to be talked about properly, and there's not time to fit it in the time scheme of these classes, so we'll do that in tomorrow's lecture. Look forward to beginning the discussion in the next clip, inshallah. So we begin the way we normally begin, which is to turn to the original text and say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. Shaykh al-Islam Zakaria al-Ansari, he says, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, and may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and in the next. We are doing number 11. ومنها منع علية الوصف ويسمى بالمطالبة والأصح قبوله وجوابه بإثباتها ومن المنع. So he says, number 11, a rejection of the ratio legis and the description. This is also called al-mutalaba, which is to call for the verification of the ratio legis. In the dominant opinion, it is accepted, and its response is to establish the ratio legis. وَمِنَ الْمَنَعِ. So from the ways of this critique are the following. Let me read the first point in its entirety, and then we'll do the translation. منع وصف العلة كقولنا في إفساد الصوم بغير جماع الكفارة للزجر عن الجماع المحظور في الصوم فوجب اختصاصها به كالحد فيقال بل عن الإفطار المحظور فيه. وجوابه ببيان اعتبار الخصوصية وكأن المعترض ينقح المناط والمستدل يحققه. So, he says, from this type of critique is saying regarding a fast that is ruined with other than intercourse, that the punishment / kafara in the case of intercourse is like the hadd punishment. It is meant to be a deterrent and therefore limited, concluding that there is no expiation. So, not the most elegant translation, but basically what he's saying is that this is a theoretical conversation, that one school is saying, we know that there's this massive kafara for somebody who engages in intercourse during the day of Ramadan, and therefore I'm going to say that's like the hadd punishment. The reason it's such a grand kafara is that it is a zajar, it is to deter people from wanting to do the act. So therefore, the hadd punishments we know are limited. They're limited to specific acts that are very, very finely, detailedly defined. We know the great principle of the hadd punishment section of law, which is taken from a hadith, udru'ul hududa bishubuhat, approach the hadd punishments with doubt. So any amount of doubt, no matter how small it is, causes us not to enact the hadd punishment and to find another type of solution in law. So he's saying, like the hadd punishment, therefore it's limited. Therefore, my conclusion is, or as we say, ergo, there is no kafara if you break your fast other than that. Therefore, there is no explanation. So the response is to demonstrate the specific nature of the description, yani in the intercourse example. And with this critique, I think I missed something. Sorry. To which one response, rather it is to deter one from violating the fast, therefore there is an expiation. So you say no, it's not, the deterrent is not the description. The issue here is that the kafara is to prevent somebody from breaking their fast, whether it's through intercourse or other means. Therefore, there is an expiation, and there is, by the way, if you break your fast other than intercourse. Its response is to demonstrate the specific nature of the description with this critique. It is almost like tanqih al-manat, clarifying what surrounds a ruling, and the affirming school verifies. Okay, and then he says also from this is ومنع حكم الأصل والأصح أنه مسموع وأن المستدل لا ينقطع به وأنه إن دل عليه لم ينقطع المعترض بل له أن يعترض وقد يقال. We'll do those in a section. And from this type of critique is to negate the ruling of the original legal issue, and the dominant opinion is that this is listened to. So this is a valid critique in the dominant position. Also in the dominant opinion, the affirming school does not have to submit to this. If the affirming school established a proof, the critique is not negated, and the critiquing school can offer a second critique and can say the following. Let me just read them. I think there's 7. Yeah. سلمنا ولا نسلم أنه مما يقاس فيه, or سلمنا ولا نسلم أنه معلل, or سلمنا ولا نسلم أن هذا الوصف علته, or سلمنا ولا نسلم وجوده فيه, or سلمنا ولا نسلم أنه متعد, or lastly سلمنا ولا نسلم وجوده في الفرع. So the critiquing school can offer the second critique by saying, we do not accept the original ruling, or we accept number 2, we accept it, but it cannot be used for analogy. Number 3, we accept it, but it has no ratio legis. 4, we accept, but we deny the description in the ratio legis. 5, we accept, but not its existence in it, in this issue, yani. 6, we accept it, but it is not multiple but limited, not a multiple illa but limited illa. And then lastly, number 7, we accept but deny its existence in the branch legal issue. And then lastly, he says about this, let me do it and then we'll come and summarize all of this. فيجاب بالدفع بما عرف من الطرق فيجوز إيراد اعتراضات من نوع وكذا من أنواع في الأصح وإن كانت مترتبة. It can be responded to by means already mentioned in the section, yani the section of the qawadah that we've been doing the last few lectures. It is permissible to critique with different critiques or multiple critiques in the dominant opinion if multiple ones are used at the same time. So all of this is a description of number 11, which is to reject the ratio legis and the description. And we said that this is also called al-mutalaba, or to call for the verification. Think of the example that we gave extensively about the fast and the breaking of the fast with intercourse or non-intercourse. This is you are asking, now this is for mujtahids, not for the awam, but the mujtahids is why? What's the wasf, what's the description that you have that makes you say there's no kafara if you break your fast? And then the other person articulates, well, it's because the kafara is so big, it's like the had punishment, it's lizajar, it's for deterrent. No, it's not for deterrent. That's the response. That's not the reason. The critique is it's for so you don't break your fast, so on and so forth. And then he gives the examples of how the two schools can go back and forth. Number 12, ومنها اختلاف ضابطي الأصل والفرع وجوابه بأنه القدر المشترك أو بأن الإفضاء سواء لا بإلغاء التفاوت. This is the one I said is about fractions. So number 12 is a difference between the description of the original legal issue and the branch legal issue. The response is to reply on the overlapping components or to demonstrate that both legal issues flow towards their legal goals. It is not enough to respond by negating the difference. So you have to not negate the difference, but show that there is a something part of it that overlaps. So, for example, he gives the example of the people that bear false witness in cases of manslaughter. That you say they participated or aided in the act, so therefore they can receive a reciprocal punishment. Al-Qawad. Like the person who has been forced against their will to kill somebody. So there is an overlap in those two scenarios. A partial overlap, not a complete overlap, because the false witnesses didn't actually kill, but they aided in the killing. And then the person who was forced to kill somebody, like if somebody put a gun to somebody's head, may Allah Ta'ala protect us and say, if you don't kill your child, I'm going to kill you, something like that, which is an impossible situation. It's actually a situation that unfortunately happens in life in different ways, that type of coercion, and it's talked about in usul al-fiqh, and therefore that's an actual manslaughter, but under duress. Under duress, it's impossible to overcome. So therefore, there's the qawad, the reciprocal punishment is possible. So you can see that just partial. Obviously, there's a big difference in the outcome. Okay, we'll pick up the discussion in the next clip, inshallah. All right, so we did 11 and 12. Now let us do 13, which is a taqsim, to demonstrate or to demarcate. وَمِنْهَا التَّقْسِيمُ. So I have to get the book in front of me. I keep looking to the side. It's not helping me. ومن التقسيم وهو ترديد اللفظ بين أمرين أحدهما ممنوع والمختار قبوله وجوابه أن اللفظ موضوع ولو عرفا أو ظاهر في المراد. So to demonstrate or to demarcate, this is to show that a particular word is between two commands. One of them is a prohibition. The chosen opinion is that it is a valid critique, and its response is that the term is appropriate in this particular context, even if based on custom, or to show that the word is clear in the particular legal context. So, if somebody said that wudu is cleanliness, we would negate that it is cleanliness and that cleanliness is an act of worship, if you take the linguistic meaning of cleanliness. Whereas wudu, as we understand it, is an act of worship that begins with intention and requires, certain acts, as we discuss in our books of fiqh. When he says that one of them is not that one of them is a prohibition, that might be an over translation. This is to show that a particular word is between two commands. أحدهما ممنوع. One of the words negates the meaning. Let's say negate instead of prohibition. So in the example, sometimes when I do the translation, but then when I record the class for you and then I speak out loud, I'm like, okay, there's a better way of saying it. So to demonstrate or to demarcate, a taqsim is to show that a particular word is between two commands and one of them negates, meaning negates the other. So wudu, if you say that wudu is defined as cleanliness and therefore is an act of worship, well, it's that negates the other meaning that wudu is a specific act that begins with intention, that we wash certain body parts in a certain way with running water. So one of those meanings is negated by the other meaning. So you have to show, the chosen opinion is that this is a valid critique. If you critique somebody that said wudu is cleanliness, and a lot of these Quran only people, they'll go around saying ridiculous stuff like that. Like, oh, you can make wudu with cologne because, I actually have heard this growing up, because the point of wudu is to be clean. Actually, it's a very good example. Of course, because it's Shaykh al-Islam, of course it's a good example. People will be like, oh, the point of wudu is to be clean, so you can just make wudu with cologne because then you smell even better than when you make water. But when you make wudu with water and you have sweat on you, you smell worse. Somebody could make a ridiculous example like that. So you are using the word, where's the critique in that argument? See, this is teaching us how to think very specifically. Where's the critique in that argument? Well, the critique is, that's not what wudu is. Because you are describing wudu as cleanliness. It could mean that, but in the context of Islam, wudu means something specific, like a salah. A salah in language, in the lugha, means a dua. Like if you go to an Arab church, or an Arab church service, they'll say, Nusalli al-an, let us pray now. And what they mean is what we mean, dua. But that's a correct use of the word linguistically. But in the confines of Islam, that's not what salah means. Salah means a specific act that's opened with the takbir and ends with taslim. That's how it's defined in our fiqh. Al-muftataha bil-takbir wa-muntahi bil-taslim. So therefore, we have a specific use for it. Same thing with wudu. So you can critique that person's claim by saying that's not what wudu means in this context. It's an act of worship that requires this intention. Okay, so I like that example, alhamdulillah. Okay, now for the lengthy discussion on critiques in general. وَالْاعْتِرَاضَاتُ رَاجِعَةٌ إِلَى الْمَنْعِ. All critiques go back to prevention. ومقدمها الاستفسار. The beginning of this is to ask for clarity. وهو طلب ذكر معنى اللفظ لغرابة أو إجمال. The beginning of this is to ask for clarity, which is to ask for a term to be clarified since it might be too clear. It might be not clear or too general. غرابة, it's not clear. وإجمالا, it's too wide. So in law, and most especially in Islamic law, and you've heard probably or sick of me saying this, is a very precise science, very precise instrument. We have to be very razor sharp with the terms. The terms mean something, they mean what they mean, and they don't mean. Jama', mana, and then they don't mean what they don't mean. So if somebody uses a term that's too sloppy, too broad, and you find that with people, unfortunately, they might be very brilliant in other aspects, but when they come and talk about certain modern topics, their language is not clear. That language that is not clear is a sign that the mind is not clear. So therefore, the beginning of the i'tiradat, the beginning of all of this critique is to clarify the terms that are used. Either the term is not clear or it's just too general. وبيانهما على المعترض في الأصح. And in the dominant opinion, the unclarified aspect must be demonstrated by the one critiquing. Well, obviously, because if you're the one that's affirming, for you it's clear, for you it makes sense. So the one that's critiquing's got to point that out. ولا يكلف بيان تساوي المحامل ويكفيه الأصل عدم تفاوتها. So this one, it took me a while to get the translation, so just bear with me because it's too condensed in the text. Clarifying what is not clear or too general in the dominant opinion falls on the critiquing school. The one critiquing that it is too general does not have to demonstrate how this is so and this is too difficult. It is enough to claim that the original term used by the affirming school is not for multiple uses. So if somebody uses a term, the affirming school, and I'm the critiquing school, if someone uses a term and I critique that and say it's too general, forget about it's not clear. Here we're talking about it's too general. I don't have to necessarily show how it's too general because it's too difficult to do that. It's enough that you say it's too general, but I can say that the words that you are using in the original context are not meant for multiple uses. In other words, there has to be specified. Because sometimes words or descriptions can have multiple uses and sometimes that they can't. To which that is responded, فَيُبَيِّنُ الْمُسْتَدِلُّ عدمهما أو يفسر اللفظ بمحتمل قيل وبغيره. The affirming school is to demonstrate the lack of confusion in the terms or to explain the term in question. And it is also said that he can explain the words with less likely meanings. So the problem here with too general is one second. If a term is used by the affirming school that could have multiple meanings, you can critique it saying it's too general. Oh, I'm running out of time. Let me pick up this point in the next clip, inshallah. Okay, so we're talking about the critique that a term is too general. If a term is used and it's too general, or if a term is used and it can have multiple usage, you can critique saying it's too general. Which usage do you mean? In which case, the affirming school has to, as he says, the affirming school is to demonstrate the lack of confusion in the terms or to explain the term in question. It is also said that he can, or the school can, explain the words with less likely meanings. Or the affirming school can say that I am using the word in this way, and you can critique saying, but it can be used in other ways. So you either critique that the original word, the critiquing school can say the original word that's used by the affirming school is not meant for multiple usage, and you are using it in multiple usage, or the opposite, or it is for multiple usage, which one are you using it for? وَالْمُخْتَارُ لا يقبل دعواه الظهور في مقصده بلا نقل أو قرينة. The chosen opinion is that the claims of the affirming school are not accepted without proof if they agree in general with the definition of the critiquing school. I think that makes sense. ثم المنع لا يأتي في الحكاية بل في الدليل قبل تمامه أو بعده. Critiques are found in proofs, not in the scholarly conversation, either before it is offered or afterwards. So these are the two examples. فالأول إما مجرد أو مع المسند كلا نسلم كذا ولما لا يكون كذا أو إنما يلزم كذا لو كان كذا وهو مناقضة فإن احتج لانتفاء المقدمة فغصب لا يسمعه المحققون. The first is either a singular critique or one with proof. For example, one can say, why can't it be this or that? Or one can say, it necessitates this or that. And this is a type of munaqada critique, that you are critiquing, it's called munaqada. If the critique, a naqd or a munaqada means to critique. If the critique after critiquing offers their own proof, this is called ghasb. Ghasb is to take something by force. It is called ghasb as they usurp the opportunity to provide proof by the affirming school, and this is not listened to. Because remember we said in the past, if a critiquing school is critiquing, their job is to critique, to point out the holes, to offer a moment of pause for the affirming school to re-articulate. The critiquing school in the qawadih, in the critique of the illah, they're not meant to provide another illah. If they do, as he says, it's not a critique, it's your own ijtihad. So again, everything, it's like a silo. I mean, I know we say we don't be siloed, it's like a negative thing, and being siloed is like a negative thing in modern parlance, but in the science of usul fiqh or ijtihad, it's important because either you're critiquing or you're doing your own ijtihad. If you're doing your own ijtihad, then give me the opportunity to critique. So you can't critique and then do your ijtihad at the same time and then I don't have to listen to that because I have my own ijtihad that's based on this illah. Okay, والثاني, and the second one, إما بمنع الدليل لتخلف حكمه فالنقد التفصيلي أو الإجمالي أو بتسليمه مع الاستدلال بما ينافي ثبوت المدلول فالمعارضة فيقول ما ذكرت وإن دل فعندي ما ينفيه وينقلب مستدلا وعلى المستدل الدفع بالدليل فإن منع كما مر وهكذا إلى إفحامه أو إلزام المانع. The second is to deny the proof that goes against the ruling. It is either general or specific, or by accepting the affirming school's proof, but by providing another proof. For example, you say, what you said, if it proves such and such, with me there is another proof that opposes it, and therefore reverses the process. The affirming school then has to defend their proof with another, and if this is rejected, then as we have stated previously, and so on and so forth, until it is defended or the critique sticks. So the point here, and this is sort of the end of the material for today, the point here is that there's going to be a constant back and forth using one or more of all of these type of critiques that we have. And the critiques and the debate can take place like this, where people are sitting together and they are going back and forth, but usually in the formative period it took place by writing. People would write fatwas and attend classes and would respond, and then somebody would bring something and and that's why we have this huge genre of literature from the Turath, from Islamic tradition about this. So it can go back and forth until either the critique sticks or the affirmation sticks. But the point of all of this, one of the points of all of this, is that this great deal of pressure in legal debates forces each school or each mujtahid, let's say, to really, really articulate their position. it's very, very hard in the established four schools, in the Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali school. And of course, there are some people that don't consider the Hanbali school, some Sunnis that don't consider the Hanbali school its own madhab, but it's just a small madhab, let's say. It's very, very hard to find positions in legal positions of fiqh in these schools that are not backed by a huge mountain of evidence. So, as a young student, you study a very small primer of fiqh in the book, and that primer is devoid of the dalil, is devoid of the istidlal, is devoid of the illah, it's devoid of the everything. It's just points of law. But you have to understand that those points of law are a tip of it's like an iceberg, and there's a huge body of evidence that goes below it, and that evidence, as we say in English, has been stress tested. In other words, all of these critiques that we're talking about and all of these examples that we've given up in this section of qiyas, specifically in the section of the qawadah, of critiquing the illah, they are based on real examples. Real examples, largely, we were arguing the Shafi'is and the Hanafis because it's an easy example to find, but there are other sort of things that are out there. Some of the madhahib that didn't make it, and we have over 80 madhabs in Islamic law, in Islamic history, afwan. Some of those madhahib that didn't make it because they weren't stress tested at this level, or they were stress tested in some aspects but not all aspects, or they didn't have students to further the madhab of their imam, or the books were lost, so on and so on. There are many examples why. But the stress test is very important. So as difficult as this section is of usul al-fiqh, it's really, really important that we go over it and over it again and again and again and again. A lot of the other sections, I think, are easier to understand because the Quran and Sunnah, we kind of understand that. And we're more familiar with the text of the Quran and Sunnah. We don't usually, day to day, engage in ijtihad debates. So obviously, it's a little bit raw. So these things, I don't want you to be like, oh, I don't understand or it's not clear. Maybe I was unclear in certain things. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive me. And I'll obviously do my best in all of our encounters to articulate. But this is something that just needs to be gone over again and again and again until you become familiar with it to the point where you get it and you understand. So these are the 13 main critiques, and then he kind of concludes that with a summary of the critiques in general and how we go about them, what the affirming school has to do, what the critiquing school has to do, and the limits. And then following that, he will talk about qiyas, analogy, as being one of the authoritative tools of interpretation of our deen, and then that will conclude the entire section or book 4 of this book, and then we will begin inshallah tomorrow at the same lecture. We will begin Kitab al-Khamis al-Istidlal, and then march forwards towards the end of the book. So these are this is where I'll put a pin in it here. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, in today's class we were able to finish the qawadah, finish the critiques of the illah. So we did number 11, 12 and 13. So we talked about the rejection of the ratio legis and its description, what is sometimes called al-mutalaba, which is literally to call for verification of the ratio legis, and we used the punishment or the kafara of breaking the fast through intercourse or non-through intercourse as the example. And then we talked about number 12, which is a difference between the description of the original legal issue and the branch legal issue, saying that sometimes we look at the overlying component, and we use the example of people that bear false testimony in cases of manslaughter versus somebody who was forced to kill somebody. Both of them are the cause of somebody innocent dying, but obviously in a very different way. But there is some overlap, so therefore we argue that there's a qawad or retribution punishment in both of those cases because there's a portion of overlap. So the portion of overlap is, it was a very small discussion, but it's very important because it should be clear by now, but the illah does not, or the matching illah can be partial, not fully, or there can be, in a given, let me restate that. In a given scenario, it can have part of an illah, of a scenario that we have documented in our legal tradition. It doesn't always have to be complete, which makes the task more difficult, of course, and also open to criticism. And then we did number 13, which is the taqsim, or to demarcate or to demonstrate. And then we talked about how you're demonstrating that what you are, a particular word is in between two words and one of them negates the other one, so therefore you can critique it that way. And then he ended with a lengthy discussion of a couple of paragraphs about critiques in general, and what is on the affirming school and what is on the critiquing school, and where the limits of each are. And then I ended right before the conclusion, because there's just no time to do that. We'll do that in the next class. But I did end with just some parting thoughts about why I think this section is important, and some advice how we can, how we need to kind of go back to it over and over again, because this is really the heart of all of ijtihad and all of usul, is the process of qiyas. والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا.